Welcome to Blaze News to the Mandate, day 49. I'm Jill Savage. Well, tonight on the agenda, the New York Times reported that NATO and the United States have been secretly enmeshed with the Ukrainian military throughout the war with Russia. In short, the Biden administration constantly worried that their actions would trigger World War III while telling the public that everything was fine. According to Politico, Planned Parenthood received notices from the Trump administration that their Title X funding is being withheld due to their possible violations of federal civil rights law and Trump's executive orders, including his prohibitions on promoting DEI and taxpayer subsidizations of open borders. Well, federal president frontrunner Marine Le Pen was recently banned from seeking office for 5 years and sentenced to 4 years of incarceration after she was convicted of embezzlement. Trump weighed in on this, and here's what he had to say.
That's a big deal. That's a very big deal. I know all about it, and a lot of people thought she wasn't going to be convicted of anything, and I don't know if it means conviction, but she was banned for running for 5 years, and she was the leading candidate. That sounds like this country. That sounds very much like this country.
It does sound like this country. Well, U.S. District Judge Edward Chen, who lives in San Francisco, blocked Trump from ending the temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan nationals living in the U.S., calling the move a classic example of racism. Senator John Kennedy recently weighed in on the judicial overreach that's been targeting the Trump administration. Watch.
The universal injunction has become a weapon against the Trump administration, has it not?
Yes.
And tell me again in my last 10 seconds, tell me the basis for universal injunction in Article 3. I read Article 3, which defines judicial power. Where does it mention universal injunction?
It does not, Senator. It says courts are to decide the case or controversy before them, which is based on the parties to the case.
So the Congress could act and say, look, federal judges, you render a decision to a plaintiff or a defendant, but you can't impact people outside of your courtroom other than through a class action. That's why God created class actions, isn't it?
RFK Jr. swore in Dr. Marty Makary as FDA commissioner and Dr. Bhattacharya as NIH director. Dr. Bhattacharya told Fox News that NIH will focus on restoring Americans' trust in public health destroyed during the COVID era.
Well, the trust in public health is at an all-time low, and you can see why. I mean, the public health authorities really failed during the pandemic to follow gold standard science. The way you get it back is by doing gold standard science and making sure that the public authorities focus on the most important pressing health problems that Americans face. We have chronic disease levels that are at an all-time high. Children, obese, type 1, type 2 diabetes, you have cancer, you have hypertension, you have large numbers of chronic disease problems that need to be addressed with excellent science. That's how you restore faith in science.
President Trump just signed a new executive order aimed at stopping shady ticket scalpers, making sure that the big players in the concert and entertainment world actually follow competition laws and fans aren't getting ripped off. Kid Rock joined for the signing of the ceremony. Watch this.
You better do well with this. He's going to do it. Make sure everything is nice and clean, right, for your
Make
industry.
America funny.
Because you're not in a clean industry. Hold that up. Okay? Thank you, everybody.
Now let's bring in Blaze News editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson, who almost wore the same outfit today as Kid Rock there. I feel like that was an option.
It's true. I have it in my closet. I have two of them, actually. But I felt to be good. We'll go a little more muted today, just from
yeah. Okay, let's go from Kid Rock to World War III, because that's what the New York Times is throwing out with all these revelations about the Ukraine war. That secretly, okay, things aren't going well, but publicly, everything's fine. Nothing to see here.
I mean, here's the problem with playing with fire, right? Quite literally, playing with nuclear conflagration is that these people think they're very smart. They think they are experts, right, in foreign policy, and we were boots on the ground. We were doing all the kinds of things quietly that they said we weren't doing. because they knew the American people were not down with pushing, turning this up the knob up to 11 and threatening Russia's response, which never came because, as it turned out, Putin was somewhat muted in his response to the U.S., right? I mean, this was all behind the scenes, but both sides knew it. So this is really dangerous stuff. It shows why we needed Trump to get in there, and it shows the depth of reform that is needed at the State Department and throughout the entire national security and foreign affairs complex.
You talk about reform. Reform is definitely needed at NIH and public health, and just restoring some of that trust, because if you go to a doctor right now, a lot of people in the audience are going, do I believe anything that is going to be said? Where does this stand on a national level?
Yeah, so this is a significant moment because we're still in the beginning of the administration, even though it's day 49, right? Yeah. Isn't that what you just said? So we're still in the beginning. So what you need to realize is we haven't even begun to fight here, right? Jay Bhattacharya coming in is saying all the right things that you need to say for truth, justice, and reconciliation. I still want to see the punishments, right? Because the problem is what happens is the media with COVID, they've done the same thing as they're doing with Ukraine, right? They start to publish these articles after the fact to cover their you-know-whats and say, oh, actually, we were doing these things and we covered that now after the fact when it doesn't matter. And actually, COVID, we were lied to about some of this stuff. And so you need people like Jay Bhattacharya to get in there and to actually, recite the truth, lay out on the record what happened, and then change things moving forward and seek punishment for anything that we can actually get redress on.
We have so many stories about judicial overreach here on the show. I wonder, just how long do you think that this is going to be tolerated? When you look at the things that are coming up day after day, when is that going to stop?
So I'm fairly confident that the overreach this time is going to lead to some not nice consequences for those judges. And it's a difficult problem, but it's not an insoluble one. And what's going to end up happening is the administration is going to have to, in select cases, ignore what these judges are, unlawfully doing. And they deserve it. That's what they deserve. And the Supreme Court is definitely going to hear this. It's going to be very controversial. But this is a path that these judges have chosen. They've chosen it for decades. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And now all of a sudden, there's going to be hell to pay. And this issue will come to a head during the Trump administration before this administration is over, multiple times.
Well, the path that Congress has chosen is completely different than what it is for you and me, because it might be a Tuesday for us, but it's a Friday for Congress. Chris Bedford will explain why everyone went home after this. We spend so much time searching for the truth in the headlines and in conversations, but how often do we stop and ask about what's on our plate? Well, once I started digging, I realized that most store-bought meat is shipped in from overseas, even, you guys, if it says product of USA. That's why I've switched to GoodRanchers.com. And when you choose Good Ranchers, you know exactly what you're getting. It's meat. It's just meat. There's no hidden additives, no antibiotics, hormones, seed oils. There's no misleading country of origin. It's just that one ingredient, which is meat. And it's born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States. And the best part is the meat is incredible. So my favorite cuts of meat are the steaks. So this is actually from my Instagram page. We actually made this ourselves. You know how people make charcuterie boards? Well, I made a meat board and added some grilled veggies to this. So if you want to join and, get up to my level, you can jump in as part of their Spring into Action special right now. So when you subscribe to any of the Good Ranchers boxes, you'll get free bacon, ground beef, chicken nuggets, or salmon in every box for a year, plus $40 off with my code Jill. Visit GoodRanchers.com for food you can trust. Because when it comes to what's on your plate, you deserve transparency. Use code Jill. It's Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Earlier today, the House took a stand against Speaker Mike Johnson by forcing a vote to allow members who are new parents to vote by proxy for 3 months. Speaker Johnson responded by sending everyone home. He canceled all the legislative action for the rest of the week, which means that including today, the House will only work 8 days this month. Here's what Speaker Johnson had to say on the matter.
That rule being brought down means that we can't have any further action on the floor this week. That means we will not be voting on the SAVE Act for election integrity. We will not be voting on the rogue judges who are attacking President Trump's agenda. We will not be taking down these terrible Biden policies with the CRA votes. All that was just wiped off the table. It's very unfortunate.
Well, he's fresh off his time on the slopes, but he makes his triumphant return right now. Chris Bedford, our D.C. correspondent and senior politics editor, joins us now. So, Chris, I think that we're going to be forced to make you work the rest of the month because, I mean, somebody around here has to work, but they're still having hearings. I understand that for the House for the 2 days that are still left in the week for them. But come on, is this an April Fool's joke or what?
I know I've still got to work, but I am still not ready after skiing this past weekend to change out of sweaters yet. And actually, one of the girls at the studio this morning didn't recognize me because she'd never seen me without a tie on in the middle of the day, which is, I guess a good way to be known in the professional environment. I think Mike Johnson didn't have a choice in this matter, and he was forced to this position by Representative Paulina Luna's temper tantrum over a complete and totally normal fact of life. There's this, both my wife and I, this is my first time away from our infant skiing this past couple of days. Both my wife and I had to make serious career choices, what we were able to do, what opportunities we're able to accept as part of raising a young family, which we're completely pro. And you want the American government to have policies to promote that sort of thing and make it easier for that sort of thing. You want policies that allow people to grow the family, but there's also different opportunities that you're going to have to say no to. So if I were offered a job traveling from DC to Florida a couple of days a week in order to represent my district in the U.S. Congress as a member, then I don't think that's a job I would pursue if I was intending to have infant children that time. And this is kind of a conceit of the laptop class in general, the idea that they could just do their job from wherever. And it's also given at a time when the protections and privileges that have been granted to pregnant women in American society, I think correctly, are being used to massively expand those privileges to any sorts of ailments. I mean, over the last couple of years, voting remotely has been a major issue. The Democrats roundly support it because they don't want to go to work anymore. They want to stay home and just fundraise and be activists. Vote by phone. They were afraid of getting sick with COVID. There's huge amounts of them that are elderly and infirm, like significantly older than the Soviet Politburo ever was, who don't want to come to work anymore because of that. And the Republicans have fought against us because it leads to all kinds of abuses if you allow for it. And it's a kind of a mixture of that laptop class conceit of, well, we don't have to go to work unlike, blue collar people or folks that are actually required in the office. And it's also kind of feeds into that whole feminist lie of you can have it all. You can do whatever you want. You can put your entire life into your different ambitions without making sacrifices, and then maybe, and that'll be okay. And that's a lie that's led to a lot of broken dreams over the years and a lot of misled people. So if Paulina Luna needs to shut down the House for the rest of this week because she doesn't want to come to work anymore to be a member of Congress, then choose a different career field. There's a lot of jobs, including my own. I'm literally currently beaming into you from my house right before I run out the door to pick a kid up from school and then run to baseball practice and then come home and make dinner that work with that. If I was a member of Congress, there's so many times I'd be seeing the light is going on at the Capitol until midnight. You're working late. You got to put that time in. You got to earn that paycheck, and you have to be away from your family. It's a sacrifice.
Well, speaking of sacrifices, I am impressed with your sacrifice with that sweater. Sweater Bedford is here, and we are happy to have you back in a shocking style, but it makes an impression. I'm still like mulling Sweater Bedford right now.
It's 70s James Bond, like bearded James Bond.
I got you.
It's a strange look.
I'm going with it. It's just good to have you back, man. It's been too long. When you look at this example, let's take this as an example because it's it is a weird week. Jill's saying these people, it's a strange stuff. Is this a sign of a lack of leadership? I mean, I guess the problem is that people are increasingly going to pay attention to Congress as the excitement of the EOs wears off, and the excitement of the flurry of activity in the beginning of the Trump administration wears off. And they're going to ask in the 2-year stretch, right, that the administration has, okay, how much of the movement now transfers over to Congress? And there's a lot of thoughtful people in the audience, regular people, voters. They understand that Congress has to do something eventually. So is this the kind of thing that threatens the mandate, or is this just a bump along the way?
I don't think it's an existential threat to the mandate, but it's a big bump. I mean, Congress is moving way more slowly than they hoped to. That's one of the reasons that you saw the nominee to the ambassadorship to the United Nations, Lee Stefanik, withdrawn from consideration last week. Is even by tomorrow morning, when I expect you'll see 2 more Republicans in the House of Representatives to the Florida special elections, the numbers there and the margins there are extremely slim. Now, Representative Anna Paulina Luna was able to get 8 other Republicans and every Democrat to join her. That's not usually enough to launch a House shutting down rebellion, but with the margins that they have, it was. It was something that could actually bring it to a halt. So it shows you that one member can do that when there's other things that the House should be working on. I mean, if they're really serious, they need to continue their negotiations on the budget despite not being in session and not being able to vote. Some of the votes that they were working on were things that aren't that consequential. Like they're never going to get their attempts to restrain the activist kind of Democrat deranged judges from making crazy rulings. They don't have the votes in the Senate to do that sort of thing. So that's one thing and they're not dealing with nominations the way the Senate's dealing with. But one of the main things that they're supposed to be dealing with is the budget. And that was expected to be done the White House expected that to be done in the first month. I never heard anything like that from members of Congress who said, well, maybe by Easter. And that has to hope now with the Senate, the ball being essentially tossed to the Senate's court anyways. So I don't see this as an existential threat as much as it is a sign of how a small group of Republicans is at this point extremely empowered to cause great difficulties for the rest. A power that can be used for good and for evil.
Well, somebody is actually working there in D.C. on Capitol Hill. It's not the guy that we really like, but Senator Cory Booker, he's not happy right now with Trump's agenda. He was actually out there for 13 hours for a speech last night. He was saying that Trump was, quote, inflicting so much harm on American safety, on financial stability, the core foundations of our democracy. Take a look.
To call to the conscience of this nation to say, I will not stand for another American to lose their health care for a billionaire. I will not stand for another veteran who's dedicated to stopping the suicide of other veterans to lose their job. I won't stand for the air quality in my community to be made worse because they're letting polluters pollute more. I won't stand for the collective assaults on the Constitution by a man who even the highest judge in our land, a Republican-appointed judge.
Well, is that just political theater, or is he just trying to use this, just to get against Trump and the momentum that they have there?
I think it's both. I mean, if I was a U.S. Senator, I would filibuster at least once in my career. I mean, you're joining the Hall of the Greats when you get up there and decide, I'm not leaving. You're not taking me out of here ever. Until at least I have to use the restroom or some other thing. Although back in the day, senators reportedly had different means. A friend of mine who was an activist in the 60s would send a senator who was planning to filibuster a decatheter that would attach to his leg should he choose to use it, although there's no word on if he ever actually did that. Unfortunately for the Senate, a lot of the filibuster kind of has been defanged. They can't really do it to the same level that they used to be able to on holding things up indefinitely. The pressure gets too much, but they still are able to do the theatrics. I like the theatrics. It's kind of one of the fun, nerdy parts of Washington, D.C. But to your point, this is an important move by Cory Booker. He's kind of been quiet, despite having run for president against Joe Biden in that original primary, being someone who then came up later, I think, and was planning to run again. His campaign didn't really go anywhere. But when you're in a time and age where people like Chris Murphy are pushing themselves forward as being champions of progressivism, and you have people like Gavin Newsom retreating, this is an opportunity that Cory Booker sees and says, I'm not that damaged by previous Democratic primaries. I can come out there and make a name for myself as an anti-Trump person. How do I seize the news cycle? Well, I jump up on stage and give a 12-hour speech.
I mean, I agree with you. It is fun. Like I like to see people have fun too. But Cory Booker in this speech, let me put it this way: the left was so excited just to see anyone out there. Democrats were just excited to see anyone out there making waves. And like you said, you haven't seen him in a while, and it's like, oh, we used to like Cory, and Booker comes back and he's giving this. So you saw him get a lot of love on social media and in the press, and I think that will continue because people. I mean, as one lefty wag said, this is really important for the American people to hear the truth they won't hear from mainstream media like Fox News, and you have to kind of like, okay, guys, take your due. I'm not sure how much it matters though, but I suppose Booker would be taken as a serious potential leader. Assuming he doesn't have too much baggage, and we'll probably see, yeah, we can talk about that too. But we'll probably see more people like him, poking around, trying to see if maybe they can take pole position here now that it's wide open, right?
Yeah, and this is the time that you start to see people maybe step in and try to make themselves champions. The Democrats are so low in morale. They're itching for a fight in anything. They're so low on morale that they're sending millions and millions of dollars to Republican plus 35 districts in Florida for a special election. They're just hungry for a fight, hungry for a win. And this is the sort of time when members of the opposition party really make their stand. Remember, Senators Mike Lee and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, the original wacko birds, were able to make a name not because they were part of the ruling clique at all. They were far removed from it. They were far removed from even the majority, the minority, Senate minority leader at the time, Mitch McConnell, and certainly not in charge of President Barack Obama's White House. But they made their name by getting up there, opposing, standing up, giving speeches. However, one of Cory Booker's problems is if you compare his intellect to Lee's or Paul's or Cruz's, I don't think that they're quite the same. He doesn't have that same understanding and grasp of history and the law that the others do. But he still does get how to be a politician. He still gets how to get people excited. So I don't know if he's going to be any kind of intellectual heavyweight, but they're so hungry for anyone to just get out there and make a scene that why not?
It's impossible to compare Chris Bedford's intellect to anyone else because there are very few that can rise to the level of our Chris Bedford. It's good to have you back. And you know what? I'm glad that you got your cell phone back. Everything's in order. The world is right once again.
Well, one of those cell phones, my old one, which needed to retire, is still at the top of a mountain in central Maine. But there is a new one. There is another, and it is stronger than even the old one.
We shall rebuild. You know what? We'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks so much, Bedford.
See you then.
When we come back, Clint Brown will give us an update on the battle against rogue judges. Stay tuned. As the judicial lawfare rages on against President Trump, the House GOP forced a bill through committee that would limit the reach of these rogue judges by doing away with nationwide injunctions. So here with more is Clint Brown. He's the president of American Pass. So Clint, it's good to see you once again. So let's dive into this because I want to know, is this actually a bold move that the conservatives have been waiting for to rein in these activist judges, or is this just the beginning of a much bigger legal battle?
Thanks, Jill. It's just the beginning. Nothing that gets through the House that's actually going to constrain judges is likely to get through the Senate. Remember, it takes 60 votes to get anything through the Senate. We have 53 Republicans. They're not going to support, on the Democrat side, reining in these out-of-control judges. They're all for the judges. There are some things that the Trump administration could do that I hope they will do, that I'd love to tell you about. The federal rules of civil procedure, really nerdy, wonky lawyer stuff, require a bond to be put up anytime a judge issues an injunction. Courts haven't been doing this, and it could really dampen the lawfare if the Trump administration pushed for it harder.
So, Clint, let's talk about the big picture. You're a big picture guy and a little picture guy, and a guy who gets medium-sized things done as well. But every so often we need to check in with all of our friends to sort of gauge where the mandate is, the implementation of this mandate in the midst of what we were really texting about earlier today, what really is still a cold civil war in this country. So here we are, right, a few months in, and where are we?
Well, if we go all the way back to last year, before the election in 2024, we were looking at a pretty stark situation. They were trying to put the president in jail for the rest of his life and longer if they could. Someone tried to kill him twice. Things were getting really hot going into the election. President Trump won a nationwide mandate, aptly named the show. Popular vote, all 7 swing states. That shifted the game. So now the movement has to really assess where we are after he did that. Now we've had so much winning from the Trump administration that the left is on the back foot. Last night, Senator Cory Booker spoke for something like 17, 18 hours on the Senate floor, yelling into the void because he has no power to stop anything that they actually want to do. So speaking that long for absolutely no reason, just to hear himself talk, to show his constituents that he's doing something, talking isn't doing. So that shows you where the left is right now. But the big picture here is we have to assess what threats are still out there. There's a threat that the Trump administration may not be able to complete their agenda, which Jill touched on just a minute ago with these nationwide injunctions where judges are trying to stop the Trump administration. There's, the illegal invasion of our country. The Trump administration is getting that under control. Check. There's the guys with guns, the law enforcement coming after conservatives. Kash Patel was confirmed. Pam Bondi was confirmed. That's under control for now. Check. So what are the big picture threats? The big picture threats are what happens with China? What happens with AI? And as a movement, we really need to start thinking about these things. Conservatives need to start thinking about these things. Matt, you and I were talking about this recently. China produces far more energy than we do. They produce 11,000 terawatt hours per year of energy. We produce 4,800. Everything you see is powered by 4,800 terawatt hours of energy a year. China's growing at 5 to 8%. We're growing at 1 to 3%. They're going to win the AI race. And Xi Jinping has made it clear that his goal is to have socialist AI run the world. They want to win that race. They think it's the new black gold. I think it's the new rifle. I think it determines who controls the world, who has freedom. So this is something we need to look at long term, is what kind of energy we're producing. What are we doing on AI? How are we countering China? What is AI going to look like in the United States? Are we going to have freedom or authoritarian AI? These are all the big questions we should start grappling with. And I think the Trump administration is doing that. Some of their tariff actions, some of their, appointing David Sachs AI and crypto czar. There's a lot going on here that hasn't quite been explored, and there hasn't been a vision set for the movement to take action.
All right, so you're talking about China. I know that the Heritage Foundation is set to release a video on Thursday saying that the United States, we're not prepared to go to war with China and fight them because America has basically, we've abandoned the buildup of all of our tactical nuclear weapons. So do you agree with this assessment? Is this something that everybody at home watching in the audience should actually be worried about right now?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that assessment. And yes, the audience should be worried about this. We should be thinking about it. We're pushing back on the leftists, the communists here in the United States, but there's a communist entity that is a global superpower at this point, trying to enact a communist agenda around the world. Okay. We should always be worried about that. But as far as actually being able to counter them, they control the manufacturing. They have what could be the world's biggest economy. They want to be what's known as a regional hegemon. They want to control Southeast Asia, which is certainly the world's biggest economic region. That's where everything is made. They want to control Taiwan, where the chips are made. This goes back to the AI race. This is where NVIDIA produces their chips. These are the fastest chips that allow us to have AI. We may not like the idea of AI. We may not be comfortable with it, but it's coming. And I'd much rather have the United States control it than China.
Yeah, so let's talk more about that, because it's enormously important. And it seems like to me that everyone's talking about AI, but most people aren't really saying much. So I have to admit, I don't know about you, but a lot of times when people start talking about AI, I stop listening because I usually hear a bunch of blah, 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 blah. But nonetheless, we know that's because people know that this is such an important issue. So if we're looking at winning that race, what does this positive vision of the future look like for America? Obviously, we need to win the energy race. But how do we do that? And how do you kind of break down? This is the beginning of the 5-point plan to win.
Well, the beginning of the 5-point plan, that's a great question, Matt. First, we have to deregulate everything that's restricting us from producing energy. We need to recognize that this is not just about lower energy costs. This is about freedom and who controls the world. And nuclear, geothermal, natural gas, coal, oil, we need all of it. We need it yesterday. We need to move fast. By 2027, we're going to run out of energy to develop AI. What that actually means in practice is that data centers will be consuming a lot of energy, and it'll be a competition between you and me who want to heat our homes, and the data centers. And they have more money than you do. They have more money than I do, than any of us. So they can afford to buy more energy. Energy prices will go through the roof. The Trump administration has a united front on this. I've heard every single person in the Trump administration who is involved with energy talk about the importance of solving this problem. So that's step one. We produce more energy. Step two, we have to fund AI development. We have the best innovation in the world. China steals our innovation. Step 2.5, we got to crack down on China stealing our innovation. We need serious law enforcement on that. I think Kash Patel and the FBI have already shown that they're willing to move in that direction. They are moving in that direction. But weaving back in Trump style to point two, we have to produce the world's best AI. We have to use innovation. We need venture capital doing it. We need the Department of Defense partnering with venture capitalists to discover who's out there, who's producing something that is going to be of value to the United States in the military front and defense tech, and for consumer use. I use Grok all day, every day. And I think that's only going to continue. So I hope you guys do too.
Yeah, no, I think everybody does. As soon as you start getting into it and you're like, wait a minute, it produces so much better results than Google does. But I want to go back to one of the things that you're talking about with the energy consumption. And you say by 2027, we're going to be out of energy, right? Like we're going to be all fighting for this group of energy because all the data centers are going to be using it all up. But this is why we saw so many headlines last year, Clint, of the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Oracles of the world going through and saying, oh, you know what? We're going to have our energy powered by nuclear energy, which is something that, on a grand scale for the nation, we might want to start looking at, but it takes so much time to get these nuclear power plants back up and running. So how do we have this stopgap in between the data centers taking over, right? With all of the companies, they're going to have it because they've already purchased their private energy, versus just us everyday Americans that are going to be out there going, hey, I do still want to use Grok. I still want to know what's going on here in the world. I need to use my devices and everything, to heat and power my home.
Yeah, it's a great question. There are these small modular nuclear reactors that are being developed. Some of them are much more further along than others. These are, the size of a briefcase, the size of a truck that can power a data center. And an interesting thing, this is just in the weeds. It shows you what the Biden administration was up to and what the Trump administration is tangling with. The Biden administration allocated this very important type of uranium for these small reactors to companies based on their DEI qualifications. How many Black, lesbian, veteran, handicapped people do you employ? Rather than who can build a nuclear reactor and who has one that's closer to production. So that is an obstacle And that's something that the Trump administration, one of the things added to their 1,000-page list that they have to solve in order to win this race. Undo that allocation and give it to the people who can actually produce it. This competition between energy and, with AI and China, actually it's uniting a lot of factions. We're seeing this. Everybody's sort of scratching their head at Doge and this union of Silicon Valley and Republicans. When you see this big picture, it all comes together, right? Silicon Valley wants to win the AI race. For a long time, Silicon Valley had nothing to do with the Department of Defense. They had nothing to do with the US government. Most big Silicon Valley venture capital firms don't have even an office in DC. That's starting to change. You see Elon Musk coming in. Obviously, we all know what's happening there. Like I said, David Sachs in the White House is the AI and crypto czar. There's this merger happening. What it really is a counter elite that is stepping up to save the country from the current elites. The Ivy League professors, the district judges, the NGO heads, the Democrat politicians, the media stars on mainstream media. These people form an elite. This merger between Silicon Valley and Trump world is a counter elite. And it gets really interesting when you start thinking about the implications of that, which is that is a necessary but not sufficient condition for civil war. Matt, you mentioned the cold civil war that we're in. Well, often what happens in a civil war is the elite will use non-elites to attack the counter-elite. Where have we seen this happen? People are attacking Teslas left and right. They're firebombing them. They're firebombing Tesla dealerships. They're breaking windows. They're keying them. They're drawing swastikas on them. Maybe you're the Nazi if you're drawing a swastika. This is all happening, and it's all organized. We know this is organized. I think the Blaze crew, not the Blaze crew, the War Room crew, who I know we're all friends with, released something today showing Rep. Jayapal organizing, nonviolent counter protests and teaching people how to be resistant. And your risk tolerance for the resistance can go up depending on how bad the situation is. Maybe you're willing to engage in more risky activities. These are things that she was saying. This elite, this former elite, is trying to stamp out the counter elite. Now, we don't have the same motivation that they had in 2020. They seem a little bit defeated, but they're not going away. And it all centers around, are we going to be the country with the most energy? Are we going to be the country that wins the AI race? One side is for that. One side is against that. China is also against us winning that race. There's something very interesting is happening here, and not a lot of people are seeing all the pieces put together.
Yeah, that is one of the most important stories. It definitely needs some more light to be shown on it. So, Clint, thanks so much for coming on here and bringing that for us tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you know what? We're going to get into the holiday spirit because it's April Fool's Day. We'll have some of the best April Fool's headlines for you right after this. Well, everything we've done today so far is factual, but today is April Fool's Day. And you know what? A friend of the show, FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin, he celebrated by posting this joke on X. He said, "Congratulations to Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend for being reinstated with back pay and benefits. Nicely done, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel." Well, you know what? That was the April Fool's joke. So I asked you today on X what the best April Fool's headlines are that you've seen, and here are some of the best responses. So we actually start out with Kyle Seraphin. Once again, he makes another appearance on here because the New York Post, the New York Times, and the list keeps growing. He says it also on the next one. He got Project Veritas as well. He says, "I see you too." So our buddy out there, Kyle Seraphin, saying the FBI whistleblowers with Garrett and Steve Friend, they're out there being reinstated. And all these media outlets you would think would know when it's April 1st, like you need to check that. But it is something that absolutely should happen.
Well, this is Kyle's way of blowing things up and raising awareness about himself and his friends not being reinstated yet. So, it's kind of April Fool's joke that has a point. He's being a troll with a purpose, a troll with a cause, And you got to give that nod to Kyle there today, because everyone wants this to happen. You can see everyone running, and asking, is this real? They want this to happen, and they know something like it should happen.
Yeah, because we do see some of the other FBI whistleblowers. They've already been reinstated, but why can't our friends be next on the list? Let's go ahead and look at Keith. He chimed in and said that researchers at Hallmark are nearing the completion of a viable second movie plot. Now, I don't know if that was a headline or not, but I am going to choose that for the show every time, because that is really funny, because all the Hallmark movies, you know what? Some of the Christmas ones are a little different, but then they're all the same Hallmark Christmas movie.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Hallmark has like 1A and 1B maybe, but ultimately it's one, and this is hilarious because everyone knows it's impossible to have a variation on a Hallmark movie plot. The whole thing about a Hallmark movie is my job is to walk into the room, determine in under a second what the plot is. Everyone knows it, and that's why people watch Hallmark movies or do not watch them. All right, so that's what they are. I don't think you can split the atom on this.
No, there is absolutely no middle ground on that one. That one is a very black or white decisive issue. Well, our friend Jim Bicknell will round it out for us today. He said you can't make up anything when literal headlines are more insane than any April Fool's joke. And that is true. The times in which we live are so insane right now that if we told you like everything that's going on behind the scenes, I mean, there's just craziness abound that are the real headlines day in and day out.
Yeah, have you seen these people who are getting upset about April Fools, saying, "Oh, ha ha, you just I trusted what you read and you tricked me. I hate April Fools. We need to stop doing this." And I think the reason that is trending a little bit, people hating on April Fools, is because of what you just said. It's because people, how would you know in this day and age when you read this stuff? You don't know what's satire and what's not.
Back in the 80s and 90s when we were growing up and things were just fun and people loved America and it was fine. It was a totally different time. You could get away with a good April Fool's joke.
Yes, but things are much more divided now, and people have radically different ideas about what's going on, and so it's constantly, you constantly see this stuff that you think is crazy, whether you're on the right or the left.
Well, listen, if it's true what Clint Brown said, if we're all going to be fighting for energy by 2027, you know what? April Fool's jokes by then might be outlawed, but there's still a long ways to go, because we do know that there are many different sides, but we're still in that cold civil war like the two of you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's important, even for someone like me who was talking about this for years, going into the Trump administration, dissatisfied with the parties being fake really before Trump, and then seeing some hope for change with Trump, and then preaching, how divided the country was. Now, you if you're on the right, you sort of think, oh, we're ascendant, everything's great. And of course, the reality is we are still divided. So it's good because we can win divided. But here's the thing. When my friends like Clint say cold civil war, what they mean is this. Obviously, we're not out there shooting, although leftists are out there committing some violence. But nothing like that. But it's civil war because we disagree on deeper things, arguably, than at any time in American history. I mean, people disagree on when human life begins and ends. They disagree on what the human person is. They disagree on what men and women are. They disagree on what citizenship is. And they disagree on what the nation state is. So you can't really get, what else is there a God, not a God? These are really serious things. And so for sure, you can have people of different beliefs all live in the same society, right? But even in the old conception of it in America from the last century, you still had a melting pot. You still had some principles that everyone had to agree on in order to have a country. And if you don't have those principles or those shared ways of life, it's not just abstractions, it's a shared way of life. If you don't have that shared way of life, then your country will fall apart, and you just live in an economic zone. So, for instance, a really smart guy, Balaji Srinivasan, who writes about this stuff is a tech guy, a big crypto guy. What he'll say is you only have an economic zone, right, left. And so the only thing that unites you in America when you disagree on these fundamental things is currency. And once you lose the currency, you'll lose everything. Now, that may be a little extreme, but it's a logical take. So how do you win? Well, the way in which you win is by using power and governing and simply winning. Let me explain what I mean, because it sounds kind of stupid when I say it that way, but it's not. It's a profound point that the right needs to learn. Think about the abortion debate, right? How can you ever win the abortion debate when people are so divided on something so fundamental? When does human life begin? Well, here's the fact of the matter. Once you win in one state, you do what everyone said was impossible. Once Roe v. Wade is overturned, Texas passed the trigger law, then all of a sudden, what happened? Did all of the leftists leave? No, they didn't. And if the state stays pro-life over time, a lot of those people will do what? They'll change their views. And so you can change people's views when you're divided if you actually win, but you have to win because the differences are otherwise irreconcilable. And so that is why the race for power in America is so vital and so disputed. And you see that in the presidential election, but you're also going to see it moving forward when it comes to all these larger, issues without which we exist, these existential issues like whether we have nuclear energy and whether we have the chips and the power plant, the data centers, because one side, as he said, doesn't want that and the other side does. That's irreconcilable. So you have to win. And then once you start doing it, you will convince people and bring them over to your side.
Well, people will either change their views or they will self-deport and go to a different state. They will choose somewhere else to go. But in the end, you still win because it is the convictions that you have and you're actually implementing them. I look at it, and if you talk about the thing that unites us is the currency right now. Well, don't look at all of my bookmarks right there on X because you do not want to know what I think is about to happen. But I think that the best April Fool's joke is that Trans Day of Visibility was yesterday. And then we flow right in to April Fool's. Like they couldn't pick a better time to have their day of visibility. Like what day do we want to be right next to on the calendar? You know what? April Fool's, because it goes back to your point of we are so divided. You cannot, as you're saying, like split the atom on that one. You either believe that trans are beautiful and they deserve everything and this, or no, it's simply not true. Men are men, women are women, and there is absolutely no middle ground in between.
Yes, and this is why we can't get tired of winning. You have to keep winning in order to win. And some people either they will self-deport or they'll self-deport their ideas because people will go along if they lose definitively. And that's the chance that we've been given. That's the chance. This is the stakes for the mandate being implemented or not. And the point is, this cold civil war is still here. The disagreements are still here. But implementing the mandate will help alleviate those problems and ultimately bring America back together again.
And unlike the House of Representatives, we're still going to show up for work tomorrow. Unfortunately, we still have another few days here in our work week. Every day, we're still going to be here to make sure that the mandate tries to get implemented. Whether they're going to follow through on Capitol Hill or not, we'll be following them every step of the way. And we're so thankful that you're here to walk along with us. We'll see you back here again tomorrow night.
Going to be doing a lot of pushing.